welcome back to another edition of GrokTALK 3.14159, the podcast without a real name, but we're going to call it that for now. For a couple weeks, we'll probably come up with something really catchy like GrokTALK without the 3.14159, but we plan to bring this program to you every single week. This week, it is myself and Mr. Skip Murphy. Mike is off in the Ukraine. Doing
Ukraine, huh?
He's in the Ukraine. Mike is somewhere in New Hampshire having dinner, and he wasn't able to join us. So we're going to move forward. We've decided on a recording time and date. We're going to stick to it. The broadcast time and date is yet to be determined, but it'll probably be the day after, depending on post-production and any other issues. And if for some ridiculously strange reason we need to record something or we have a guest that we're recording separately, also an option, and we need to knit that in. But for now, you've got me and Skip for the next 60 minutes and a whole bunch of topics. And of course, the big news today is what most people are taking as a free speech win. Elon Musk has come to an agreement. He is buying Twitter outright. It will be his. He, got some financing through Morgan Stanley. He has $20 bajillion of his own pouring into it, and he's buying Twitter. The board has pretty much come to an agreement. They're going to ask the shareholders to accept the agreement and sell their stock for about $54 a share, and Mr. Musk will own Twitter completely. So there's lots of speculation about what that might mean. Most of us think, it should be a good thing. He has expressed a desire to open the platform up, to get rid of the craziness that the liberals have injected into it over the last few years. Mr. Murphy, good day, sir. And what do you think is going to happen with Twitter?
Boom! Yes, all those lefty heads are exploding all over. Let me read you one quote that basically sums this up. The NAACP president, Derek Johnson, said in a statement, "Mr. Musk, free speech is wonderful. Hate speech is unacceptable." That is the whole nub of the problem of why Elon Musk bought Twitter, because people don't understand what free speech is. There's nothing defined in the Constitution as to what hate speech is. Hate speech or misinformation or lies or anything else just seems to be more euphemisms by the twisting of the language of what lefties don't like to hear and wish to silence you from saying it. Thus, that's why Elon Musk bought Twitter. Boy, are they not going to like this at all.
No, they're not. And I think it's fascinating because we're kind of in the free speech business. It's our hobby. And so,
kinda?
Yeah.
Kinda, come on,
kinda,
Steve.
Yeah, and they all call us, they'll say it's hate speech because it's not their speech, and we don't care. Because, if you look at the Supreme Court so far, and I talk about this all the time whenever people bring up hate speech, the Supreme Court doesn't recognize hate speech. It doesn't really exist in constitutional law. There's no place for it. It's a lot like global warming. It's something the Marxists invented. And they just keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. But they're very good at that. And they've been indoctrinating people for years, and they're going to keep doing it until everybody believes that this thing called hate speech exists. And it may take a while, but if they aren't stopped, they will eventually have justices on the Supreme Court in the majority who will agree that things that they disagree with are hate speech. Things that they don't disagree with, no matter how hateful, are free speech.
I'm looking at this as the speech version of constitutional carry. Every single time another state passes constitutional carry, you hear the outcry from the left saying, "Oh, the streets will run red with blood." And campus people are the even worse. They don't bother with rivers. They're talking tsunamis. And each and every time the state goes ahead and passes it, what happens? Like what happened here in New Hampshire? Nada. Because criminals don't care whether they're carrying with in our case, a New Hampshire pistol revolver license to conceal carry or not. They don't care if they're open carry. They don't care if they're prohibited from having a firearm in the first place. And none of that is going to stop anybody else. This is the same thing. Already the lefties are saying, "Oh, it will be the end of democracy. It's a blow against democracy. We cannot let him do that." And I don't think that the Twitter board was going to let Mr. Musk go ahead and basically take over the company outright, because they were reminded, you have a fiduciary duty to accept an offer that is very much in the stockholders' best interest. And Elon Musk pointed out, and I thought this is, I mean, he's playing 3D chess to their bare checkers, in that he knew that, and he also put out in a tweet saying, hey, these guys don't own any stock at all, so their purposes are at odds with the stockholders. And with the lure of lots of lawsuits being filed against the directors, which could have become personal, yeah, they gave up and said, "Yep, here, give me a check."
Yeah, I mean, it's a big one. It's a very big one. It's over $46 billion or something. That's a lot. That's a lot of money, and it's a lot of money for something that kind of doesn't really exist. You know, it's just vaporware. I mean, Twitter's out there in the universe, and lots of people use it, and I'm still on it, and I've been putting content up there anyway, just because people kept asking me, why don't you use Twitter? Why don't you use Twitter? And then I started hearing rumors of this Elon Musk thing, and I'm like, well, I guess I'll use Twitter and see what happens, you know? If it gets worse, what I actually said was, I'm going to use Twitter till they kick me off. That was my plan. I said, I'm not going to quit. They're going to have to fire me. So that was my deal, and it's been maybe a month since I started using it again, and now it doesn't look like I'm going to have to worry about that. But the next part of this, of course, is the media's freaking out. Everybody's losing their mind. They're all talking about the democracy, as you pointed out. And, of course, we live in a constitutional republic, so screw you. And now, you know, there's talk about the people who work at Twitter. We've heard stories of them acting like teachers who aren't allowed to talk about sex to little kids. They're going to quit. Oh, great. Go ahead. See ya. Don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out. There's plenty of people who would love to work at Twitter if it wasn't a liberal shithole.
Yeah, we can say that. This will be on the internet rather than on broadcast TV.
I can post edit it out. But it's true.
That's true.
It's a crap hole. It's that place, you know?
Well, I told the most esteemed wife, TMEW, that I probably will be getting back on Twitter, if nothing more than to go, you know, as my 6-year-old grandson goes, who I taught this to, na 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 boo boo.
Well, you should. If this really happens and the FEC doesn't step on it and somebody doesn't screw it up, you should get back on there, because it's just lots of fun. Because if you're not familiar with what Skip does on Twitter, he just talks about what we talk about every single day. I mean, he shares the same links, the same content, the same sorts of topics, the same subjects, you know, liberty, freedom, school choice, gun rights, free speech. And when you walk around saying things like that, sooner or later, some crazy liberal is going to come over and try to crap on your parade. And the minute they do, Skip's like, oh, goody. And well, his mission is to make them like the most famous person on Twitter.
Well, generally, I didn't use Twitter all that much. In the very beginning, I was in the top 100 conservatives of Twitter. But then I ended up doing lots of other stuff. But I do use Twitter when a big event comes up, like the presidential debates or a debate here in New Hampshire. And then it's sort of like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I turn into Mr. Snark. And I look for absolutely every single opportunity, I don't care which one it is, but to make sport of people, just to puncture their sanctimonious, pusillanimous speeches and bring it down to the level that, well, it deserves. I started to do that on Gab, and you know that old joke of, comet to hit the world tomorrow, women and children hurt the worst. I think there's going to be some serious ramifications with some of the alternative social media that sprung up because of Twitter, because of Facebook going so far left. Gab is probably going to take a hit. Parler is probably going to take a hit. Gitter, and full disclosure, we have a lifetime membership to Gab because of Gab TV. But
we're not leaving any of these platforms, by the way. We're gonna hang out, and in a little bit I'll be going through the list. But I have a couple of reads for our breaks, which we still have a couple minutes. But we're not going to change that. We're going to keep adding content.
But the worst is what just happened over the last couple of days, where Truth Social, President Trump basically signed an agreement with Rumble TV, with all of their servers, to run Truth Social on it. And now he's saying he won't go back to Twitter. What's the over-under that he won't be able to resist the lure of going, na-na-na-na, boo-boo, to all those millions of liberals who wanted him kicked off in the first place? It'll sort of be like when George Bush stepped away from the presidency and Obama took over, and you always saw those little signs of Bush's head slightly canted to the right and waving, and the cartoon was, "Miss me yet?"
That's a good question. I don't know if there's something about Twitter, and I don't know if it's because it was the first of its kind or just because of the way it's kind of embedded itself in the culture. The people, it's one of the reasons I didn't want to leave it just yet. I would be fine if they kicked me off. That'd be fine. But kind of like they pretty much kicked us off of Facebook, even though we're still technically there. We just don't update it. But it's Twitter, and I don't know else how to explain it.
Well, look at it from a technical standpoint. Both Twitter, Facebook, and all the rest of the social media are basically microblogs for those who can't program or don't want to bother. I mean, we put a lot of time and effort into Granite Rock. We are independent. If you want to go visit other blog sites, we actually say, we're linking to everything in our stories so you can go check it out for yourself. Versus Twitter and Facebook, they want to keep you into their own little world and universe and never let you go. They want to be those centralized versions that say, hey, we've captured you forever. We say, hey, come and visit, and if you like us, let us know. So who knows what's going to happen if everything's going to go open, as Musk says. I mean, it's going to be kind of cool to see all of a sudden, how did they shadow ban? And don't forget, Granite Rock got shadow banned because I used to put out a lot of tweets during those debates, and I never saw them return.
Yeah, and so that's a big thing. There's that rumor about the government backstopping Twitter's servers. We'll get all that cleared up, whether you believe it or not. And that's a completely different story for another time, I think. We're going to jump into a quick read here for a break, and then we're going to come back and broach a new subject. So here I go with my read. And I think my daughter's home because the dog's barking.
Yes, don't you just love this distributed studio? I'm waiting for my two pups to just leap at the door.
I'm in the basement, and I can hear. The minute people start stomping upstairs, you'll hear it. It'll be great. All right, this segment of GrokTALK is brought to you by GraniteRock.com, New Hampshire's leading political blog site. Please be sure to like, follow, or subscribe on YouTube, Gab TV, Minds, MeWe, Getter, Codius, or you can follow the real NH Steve, that's the real NH Steve, on Twitter, and hopefully pretty soon Mr. Murphy. If you'd like to sponsor a segment on GrokTALK, please email steve@graniterock.com. All right, let's get into the next segment. You had a ton of stuff that you sent me for us to talk about, and I didn't have a chance to even begin to scratch the surface on any of it. But here's how this works around here, ladies and gentlemen. Somebody's going to say something, Mr. Murphy, in this case, is going to bring up a topic, and we're just going to talk about it. That's how it goes.
You want me to take one of my topics?
Take one of your topics and let's run with it.
I thought you were going to go with... Actually, I want to talk about your topic, which was the Pappas and Hassan flip-flop on the border and how it's driving the rest of the New Hampshire Democrats, especially the Latinx. Unless you're politically active, the Latinos want to be called Latinos, not Latinx. See, that's the white man telling them how to call themselves.
White liberal, actually.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
So for somebody, Hassan and Pappas, who were all against what President Trump were trying to do at the border wall, now they've fallen in love with it. Because, as we always see, the Democrats pivot way to the center when they know that they're in desperate trouble. And now, it's like in my mind's eye, I'm seeing Senator Hassan holding on to one of those steel pillars, holding it as affectionately as she would her grandson. How's that for an image?
That's an excellent image. For people who don't understand it, Maggie Hassan and Chris Pappas are not strong candidates. There's a great deal of suspicion about how Chris Pappas managed to win a re-election in 2020. But then again, there's a lot of suspicion about how a lot of people managed to win things in 2020. But even if you believe nothing ludicrous or crazy happened, Chris Pappas is a weak candidate, and so is Maggie Hassan. And they both are up for re-election. And so the National Party and the State Party are like, you have got to do whatever you can to stay in office. So one of the things they did was they went right on immigration. Now, the fun part about that isn't just that it's typical, it's a flip-flop, it's completely ridiculous, because the minute they get elected, they're going to go right back to the other side, is that this rep, whose name is not in front of me at the moment, and I apologize to her for not having it here. But she was recorded, and she went national because she got on the House floor. She's a New Hampshire state rep, and she basically excoriated her own party and Congressman Pappas and Senator Hassan, or Hassan if you prefer, for basically, she's embarrassed, she's discouraged, she's very unhappy about what the party has done. And what has the party done? Well, according to people in the know, the leaders of the state Democrat Party in New Hampshire have been pressuring black and brown activists to remain silent on this flip by Chris Pappas and Maggie Hassan, which is just so typical. It's so how many times have you and I, Skip, pointed out to people that Democrats are frauds, that they just say what they need to say, and that they treat everybody the way they feel like they need to get their votes, and the minute you step off their reservation, or the minute you go the wrong way, or the minute they don't need you anymore, they treat you like garbage.
Yeah, and the name that you were looking for was New Hampshire State Rep Maria Perez, Democrat from Milford, and she basically... and Eva Castillo, who was also a state rep, the Latinos resigned from the Latino caucus in the New Hampshire Democrat Party.
Yeah, they extracted the caucus from the Democrat Party Executive Committee. Is that right? I believe that's what they did.
Yep. And, I look at what Ray Buckley's must be going through, pulling out whatever hair is left at this point, because he's got, 2 months ago, we started to see the Democrats all saying, we're tired of being under a monarchy or an absolute dictatorship and telling us how to do things, who's going to run, doing everything and micromanaging their people. And I looked at that and going, and that's what they want to do to us as an entirety. And it's got to be bad when their own party is starting and say, enough. What, three of the former Democrat reps went independent? At least two, maybe three. But you're right. When you look at what Pappas and Hassan have done, anybody who follows politics knows how bad this really is. The problem is how do we get to the people who don't follow politics? Let's face it. We are part of the activist class here in New Hampshire. We live, breathe, and, I'm not dead yet, but, die about this stuff. So we know intimately what's going on. Most people, not so much. So the question will be, what is the mainstream media going to make of this? The Union Leader had a perfect opportunity to kind of salvage its old conservative roots and point out the hypocrisy there. New Hampshire Journal did. But as far as I could tell, they said she was at the border. They said that, there seems to be some trouble within the party, but they didn't go for the throat, which tells you more about the Union Leader than it did about Maggie Hassan.
That's true. And, of course, there are other dynamics at play here. For example, the state reps who walked away on this particular issue are going to continue to vote Democrat on every other issue, and the Democrat Party knows it. They absolutely know that these people aren't just, they're not going to walk away. I just don't see it happening. You're talking about liberal Latinas in the state party. They're Democrats, and this one particular issue isn't going to define everything else they do. So it's not like we've gained any ground, but like you said, there's a lot of hypocrisy here. The Democrat Party does this on every issue to everybody, and it's not just the border. And so not only do regular people not necessarily see how this works, and that's one of the reasons why we kick this dead donkey as often as we can, people within the Democrat Party don't, which is what really made the walkaway movement such an impressive thing. And, people like Barry Weiss and, a number of different people who've come into contact with the cancel culture or rubbed up against the Democrat Party the wrong way, only to discover that they were the ones who were going to get shocked, and they were just completely dumbfounded and surprised at how poorly they were treated and about how well received they were by the other side, the people they were supposed to hate and despise and who were evil and wretched, and in fact are the opposite of everything the Democrats say, which is typical because just about everything a Democrat says they're going to do means the opposite of what they say.
Yeah, and that would include you and I. I'm such a nice guy when you get to know me. Not to some of my Democrat opponents. However, that said, they have to be worried because not so much here in mostly lily white 97% or 95% white New Hampshire, which is another problem giving the New Hampshire Democrat Party indigestion, which is the first in the nation primary stuff. And we ought to talk about that, and we didn't put it on the list.
We can do it in the next segment.
But the Latinos and the blacks are all walking away. Every week I see a larger and or a lesser and lesser percentage of those folks still in the Democrat camp when I look at the polls. And they must be going, oh my gosh. And I'm going, yes, red tsunami. Yeah, all right, let's not, as Glenn Reynolds of Instant Pundit says, don't get cocky. There's still a lot of work to do and you got to go do it. But, if they lose even more of a percentage than what President Trump got, the Democrat Party is in deep sneakers over the next elections. They used to say demographics was destiny. Well, you put in the price of gas, put in the price of food, you put in the price of this, that, and the other thing, and sooner or later, those demographics are going to move away.
Yeah, and for all the crying and whining we get from the rhinos and the never-Trumpers about Donald Trump, he actually made the big tent bigger. I mean, he made it a lot bigger. Yeah. He brought in, not just for one election, but he brought in blue-collar Democrats. He attracted unions. He attracted cops. He attracted steel workers and pipeline workers and gas fitters and all these people who got work because when he was president, he made sure there was work for them to do. And now they don't have work because of Democrats and their fake pretend climate scare. And they don't really care what the costs are. And they think that, I'm pretty sure they feel convinced that they can win presidential elections ad infinitum. And maybe they've come up with a way to steal elections indefinitely, and perhaps they have. But they still have to steal Congress every single election. And if you're stealing elections and you're only doing it in key states, say the 7 or 5 or 6 or however many there was that made a difference in 2020, that's not going to win you enough seats in Congress. And the more you do it, the worse you look, especially when the guy that you cheated for, if in fact we cheated, or he cheated, or they cheated, is Joe Biden or anybody like him. And when you look at the bench for the Democrats, Kamala Harris, she's worse than Biden, okay? The only reason Biden is still president is because Kamala is the vice president. And I think, honestly, Joe's wife, Jill, had a lot to do with that because I think she saw Joe and she saw the vice presidency and she saw the Democrat Party and she said, I have to convince somebody to pick a vice president who's worse than Joe, and then Joe will get to keep his job.
Mission accomplished.
And so I think that's what happened. But anyway, I mean, look at all the people who ran in the last election. Tulsi Gabbard's the only one who has a brain cell to rub between her, and she's still a Democrat. But at least she likes America enough to know about things like border security and national defense and things like that. I wouldn't vote for her, but because she's bad on a lot of other stuff, but she's the best one, and they don't like her.
No, they don't, which is a good reason for us to at least smile at her. I wouldn't call her a blue dog Democrat, but like I used to call Dennis Kucinich. He was a way out loon, but he was an honest one. Same thing with Bernie Sanders. Never vote for him. Will do everything I can to foil his policies, but he stays true to what he believes, with the exception of, he used to say, higher taxes on millionaires and billionaires, until he became a millionaire after selling his books and now owns 3 homes. So maybe I shouldn't keep him in that honest state of being. Whereas Kucinich, I will. I know a few Democrats who are true to what they are, haven't gone left. They love America, as you said, and all the rest of it. They just want to spend a lot more on the welfare state than what I would. But pretty much in a lot of cases, a Joe Manchin, he's a blue dog Democrat. Sinema out of Nevada, same thing. And just giving them fits and starts. I'd be willing to trade a couple of our rhinos for those two. I could put up, I bet you they vote more in line with what we would have and stopping the really bad Democrat stuff than some of our rhinos do. Even here in New Hampshire. Are you listening, Mr. Deshays up in Wolfboro, who has combined scores in the low 50s as a Republican?
Yeah, we...
Yes, we will name drop as we go and do these things.
Oh, absolutely. No, we have no... That's what we do. We absolutely do that. Excuse me.
Gesundheit.
Thank you. We don't have a problem with that, and I think you're right. I think the Democrats have another difficult situation on their hands. Locally, it's hard to tell. You got to get the turnout, and a federal election drives turnout. Midterms will drive turnout, not as much as a presidential election, but this year could be different. I mean, there's a lot going on. The economy's pretty lousy. Prices are going up. Food plants are starting on fire and having planes land on them, and all kinds of crazy stuff's going on in the world, and things aren't getting cheaper. And, everybody talks about kitchen table issues. Democrats love to use the word kitchen table issues. The problem is their kitchen table is 40 feet long, and you're at the far end of it. And they're not bringing anything down to your end, so you're kind of stuck on your own, and they don't care. They really don't care. And if you complain and they say, well, we'll just print some more money, all that does is make your money worthless. They're really just making things worse for you. And that should be on a poster or a bumper sticker. That's what the Democrat Party does. It seems very deliberate. And, to say, well, geez, inflation's really bad, let's blame Putin for it. And my response to that was, you guys are so incompetent that one guy from a second world country in demographic decline can completely control the American economy and you can't stop him? You're idiots.
Yeah, if you're not part of the Democrat identity group politics totem pole, and you never know,
I'm not.
Yeah, and even if you were, you never know where you'd land from one minute to the next because it's totally changing all the time. That 40-foot table, yeah, you're right. You and I would not be at the top end of that table or the totem pole unless they want to throw darts at us.
We wouldn't even be in the room unless they were lynching us.
Well, you notice the shirt that I have on.
Yes,
we will not comply. Kind of backwards.
And I can actually read it.
Well, it's backwards for me. And, by the way, go buy your AR-15s because pretty soon Sig Sauer will have you changing and going after one of their new MCXs because that's what they just sold $6.8 billion to re-equip the Army and the Marines with their new gun, with a new pistol and rifle. Rifle and machine gun. That came out in the last couple of days. 6.8 mil.
Oh, good deal.
Yeah. So anyways, I digress.
6.8 mil, that's small change. That's not very much money.
No, it was 6.8 billion for a 6.8 millimeter round.
Oh, there we go, billion. Okay, see, I thought you said million, and I was confused for a second because that's like money Nancy Pelosi finds in her sofa. So,
or stuffed in with the Baskin and Robbins in her $25,000 freezer.
$30,000 twin fridges, yes. Okay, great. We're going to move into our next segment in a second. Being a premier digital destination in northern New England makes GraniteRock.com a great place to get more for your advertising dollar. You'll also be supporting free speech instead of the journalism of paid reporters and an agenda-driven corporate media that are struggling to compete with us online. So promote your events, candidates, or your small or large business where thousands of American-loving patriots and a handful of liberal trolls across New England will see it. To learn more about how to advertise on GraniteRock.com, please email Steve at GraniteRock.com. That's Steve at GraniteRock.com.
GROK.
GROK.com.
Now so I sound like Liz from Life with Liz.
Liz, I'm
nice.
I'm stuck. I got my lips stuck. All right, so where do we want to go next? We can talk about anything you like.
Yeah, Steve asked for 2 topics between Mike Rogers and I. I sent him 8 all by myself. So let me go to the next to last one, which I thought was nice. The RNC decided to withdraw from the Presidential Commission for Debates. And my only retort, right, my first retort was, what the heck took you so long? Really, how many times have our presidential candidates from the Republican Party or from the right side of the aisle, because there was a number of years I refused to be a Republican in name, mostly because of Jeb Bradley and New Hampshire State Rep LaChance bringing expanded Medicaid to New Hampshire, making government grow larger and more expensive. But anyways, how many times, look at what they did to Romney. Look what they did to McCain. Look at what they do to all of them. When they always bring in a leftist operative like Georgie Stephanopoulos. Remember when he asked the question about contraceptive? And all of the Republicans are going, where the heck did that come from? That was a coordinated attack because that was, what was her name? Something Fluke.
Oh, Sandra Fluke.
Yes, because then they started running. They made a whole issue out of a whole question. You cannot tell me that question had not been focus grouped, talked about, ramifications thereof, and that political operative who was Clinton's wonderkind at the White House, who tries to present himself as a journalist, basically shut every single Republican candidate for the RNC nomination in a flash. They were all looking at each other going, what did he just say? Can you repeat the question, please?
Who wants to ban contraception? Who said that? And then Sandra Fluke, since you brought her up, she's talking to Congress about how she can't afford contraception. There's pictures of her online, like in Spain with her boyfriend, right? So she can travel to Spain with her boyfriend, but she can't buy the pill, which is free just about everywhere already.
Or a condom, for that matter.
Right, and they're not expensive. Oh, they might cost more now, but that's Democrats' fault.
Yeah. It was just the silliest of arguments, and it was just to make a talking point to make Republicans look bad. And really, they all said, go to the store. The problem is the left wanted it for free. Now, it was already free in high schools and junior highs. Yes, I'm not going to go into the rest of that as to why. You can, readers and listeners, you can take that for what it's worth. But that's what all they wanted to do. They wanted to shift the burden on to lots of other people who probably didn't need it anymore or couldn't care.
Well, it was like Obamacare, forcing 80-year-old women to pay for abortion.
Yes.
Insurance. Abortion insurance when you can't get pregnant.
Right. Like the sisters, the nuns who had taken a vow of chastity and
Little Sisters of the Poor,
that's
or something
right.
like that.
You got
yeah.
it. I mean, it's just one of those things that they do it very, very well, and the Republicans just harumph and, Twitter themselves, and they don't have an answer. But it certainly gave us a lot of blog fodder at the time at how ridiculous it was. But they seem to have made hay with it. So
They did, and so now we've gotten to where we are today, which was the RNC has decided, you know what, you people suck. You have no interest in actually having an honest, unbiased debate, so we're not going to play in your little pond anymore.
That's right, and I think it's correct. And further, I don't think that any appeasement should happen from the RNC. I think the RNC should say, we're not going to go with you. Let you go ahead and put the empty seat in your national debate. We're going to organize our own because now there is sufficient new ways to reach our primary voters through social media, live streaming, and all of that.
Newsmax.
We don't need you. Now,
OANN.
Now, what they ought to do, however, which the major networks would never do, Steve, you and I should be the moderators. Can you imagine? I keep telling people think that we just go after Democrats. I keep saying, I don't care if you're a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, a socialist, a greenie, a libertarian, or any other type of letter that you can think of. We are equal opportunity abusers, and we probably know a whole lot more on the issues than most people. So wouldn't we have fun? We'd be sitting there with these big grins on our faces just asking tons of questions, especially to rhinos.
Well, if we're talking about a Republican debate, sure. Just look at the last 18 to 20 months. We've been talking about Chris Sununu, his administration, people he's appointed, judges he's appointed, his Department of Health and Human Services, or Department of Health and Inhuman Services, as I prefer to call it, and a lot of people who support him by default simply because he's the governor. And all the things that he's done, good and bad. We've said good things about Chris. We've said a lot of good things about Chris. But the entire COVID thing, the lockdowns, all of it. And then, he's made some mistakes. When a protester stepped on his lawn and he called it, this gun-toting guy invading his, just stop. And then he even cancel his outdoor inauguration because he was afraid. He said he was afraid of all these gun rights people, and it's like, give me a break, and it's stuff like that from a guy who's otherwise good on guns. You put a gun bill in front of him, he's going to sign it, but then he does this crap, and he's just kind of started wandering down this path, this Sununu path, and so there's lots of Republicans. Whenever we go to speak to Republicans, I have to preface things by making sure they understand that I'm not here for the party or your candidate. I'm here for the principles. I'm here for the founding principles, constitutional principles. And where we agree, then we'll get along fine. And where we don't, we're just going to disagree. And I'm going to tell you why I disagree. And you're more than welcome to spend as much time as you want disagreeing with me. I'm fine with that. But it's not personal. It's, this is a physical relationship. There's no emotion involved here. I'm just telling you what I think about what's going on, and you're disagreeing with me, and I'm taking the side of liberty for the most part, as far as I can tell. And it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent or a socialist or a Marxist or Bernie Sanders or, Murkowski up there in Alaska, or maybe you're the best senator there ever was. We've had Bob Guide is a fine example. He's done some great things, and recently he's done some not so great things. So it's not, we're not going to carry your water no matter what color it is. We're pretty particular about it, and we base it on the exact same thing. You can go back all the way to 2006 when Skip started this thing, and you're going to find the exact same principles driving the content the entire time.
Yep. And as far as everything you just said, you know what I say about that? As far as being a moderator for a presidential campaign, that was just us warming up in the on-deck circle. Imagine what we do when we actually get to home plate and start swinging that piece of wood around.
Yeah, you'd have, and there are plenty of actual, journalists in places like Newsmax and OANN and, Red Right Daily, and there's tons of them
Federalist.
now. There's Federalist, there's Daily Signal, there's a whole bunch of places you can go where you will find people. You can go, John Clark in our state to our left in Vermont, who writes at True North Reports. He would be a great moderator. The guy's smart. He's one of us. There's so many people who could do it.
I know one that would just drive everybody nuts. Kurt Schlechter from Town Hall.
my Lord. I don't watch debates, but I would watch that debate.
I would
Absolutely
pay
would watch
money
that.
for that debate.
That would be amazing.
Yes,
We can't even talk about how he would conduct the debate.
I would love to be able to quote him more often, but I can't. All of his columns are so great. You can't pick out just one little thing, because that's what we do. We look at something that somebody's written, and then we write our own posts about it. I look at that and go, I can add nothing, but I can imagine him sitting at the microphone with a wink in his eyes, and he's about to uncork a voice hand grenade.
Well, he's good. I mean, he's like Mark Stein. He's real good at improv. He can it's just right there. The minute you say something, he's got a response. And so he writes like Dennis Leary speaks. Not Dennis Leary. That's not the one I want. Anyway, he just rattles it out, and it just comes out, and it's just so cool. And just listening to him talk and reading his writing. So yeah, that would have been amazing.
Well, now he might have a shot.
Oh, that's true. If the Republicans decide that they're really going to do their own, and they're looking for some people, and here's the question though: is the RNC really going to commit to moderators who are actually going to ask difficult questions?
I'm not so sure about that. I'm also not convinced that they would pick on people like you, like me, like Kurt Schlechter, and a whole bunch of others, whether they are humorous, snarky, or really deep thinkers.
Tucker Carlson.
Tucker and Kurt, what a show that would be.
That's my debate wish. I've just had a dream, and that's my dream. I want to see a debate. I don't care who the candidates are. I just want Kurt, I want Tucker to be the moderators. Excuse me.
Well, if I was going to be the moderator, though, I would say put that board in front of me, because if you're going off on a tangent and not answering my question, I'm going to mute you and go to the next one and go to the next one and go to the next one. And then I want them to all go after each other. Like you said earlier, Tulsi Gabbard went after Kamala Toes Up and just literally shivved her right between the ribs. And that was in an off moment. I think seeing how well these candidates go after each other is far more exciting than any moderator. That would include even us.
Well, they are professionals, technically speaking. I mean, politicians are good at that sort of thing.
No,
and if
not
they're
really. Not some.
Well, I mean, we've talked to a lot of people.
Go Jeb.
Yeah,
go Jeb.
Yeah, go Jeb. We've talked to a lot of candidates, presidential candidates. I mean, this may surprise new listeners, but we've interviewed a lot of presidential candidates, U.S. Senate candidates, congressional candidates, governors, and people like. When I tell people this, like if the subject I don't just come out and say it. I don't even usually talk about that stuff. But people will say, "Have you heard of so-and-so?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I think I interviewed him." And they're like, "What?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I mean, that's just kind of a thing I do once in a while. We'll just, go to these events and we'll talk to people." And then the conversation leads to, "Well, who else have you talked to?" And I'm like, "I don't remember." It's a lot of people. And, you remember some of the bigger names. Ted Cruz, we've interviewed him a couple times.
A few times.
As an example.
He called us from an airport waiting for a plane. He thought we were important enough to talk to.
Yeah,
Doug and I even interviewed now President Biden.
Oh, back when he was running in
the second time.
The second time.
The first time he got eliminated because he got caught plagiarizing that British politician in Parliament, and so he scurried away. But then he came back and he did absolutely nothing.
He got 4% of the vote. Now you can actually have credible accusations of rape against you and still get elected president if you're a Democrat. So anyway, we're going to take another really, really short break. I'm going to do a really quick read here, and then we're going to go into our final segment. And Lord knows where that's going to go, because I have no idea. That's just how we do things around here. As a reminder, GrokTALK.com will be holding its first Grok Meet of 2022. The date is May 14th from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Area 23 Pub in Concord, New Hampshire. For details, visit GrokTALK.com and click on the Grok Meetup ad in the right sidebar. It should be on every single page of the website. The gathering is a chance for authors and readers to eat, drink, and mingle. That's May 14th at the Area 23 Pub in Concord, New Hampshire. Details are available at GrokTALK.com.
Okay.
So we're into our last segment.
I got more. Maybe we can.
I know. Well, you sent me 8 things, and we only have 4 segments, and I had at least 2 or 3 myself. So maybe someday, if this starts to go really well, and it's not a lot of work, we'll go to 2 hours. But for now,
Okay.
let's do an hour and see if we can build an audience.
Let's do 2 real quick. First, this should be rather easy. Today, both Finland and Sweden have agreed that they're going to apply to be NATO members and put in the paperwork the week of May 22nd, both at the same time. This is after Putin threatened thermonuclear war against the two of them. So the question would be, will they pull it off? Will Putin do anything? And if he does, is he basically going to have all of NATO, which is still assembling a lot of weaponry right around his border, coming in like the Golden Horde?
Well, that's a good question, because if things go nuclear, then there's not going to be much left.
No, but even if it's tactical nukes, it's not good. But tactical...
No, because they'll get an immediate response, and then everybody will just start pushing buttons, and then we won't be doing a podcast anymore. But it's a good question.
It all depends. If China comes in with Russia, what are they going to do? But it also means that Putin's already threatened both Finland and Sweden, who butt up against a good part of northern Russian borders. You know, Finland already beat the Russians before, back in World War II. Sweden has always been neutral, but they're been changing their viewpoint over the last few years, given the bellicosity of Putin threatening everybody in that region. Is this going to... There's also the rumors that he's not doing too well. I did read one account that, is he an end-stage syphilis because he seems to be acting so weirdly behind the scenes and making these kinds of things? Is it a good thing? Is it a case of they sign the paperwork in a day and then all of a sudden Putin comes across the border? What do we do? Because Article 5, which is the triggering mechanism in the NATO agreement, do we now go to war? Because now, we have an ally. We're very friendly with them now, but not an official ally. Now it's like when we got attacked and the rest of the world within NATO came to our aid in Afghanistan and elsewhere.
Well, I think that...
but that's supposed to be quick, real quick.
Well, real quick, who else? I mean, Vladimir Putin is the de facto authoritarian leader of Russia. But he's not the only guy doing things. So I guess the question has to be, if he is... This isn't America, right? So we have a disabled president, and he's puttering along, and we're all hoping quietly and privately, and maybe not so quietly and not so privately, that if he decides one morning he's going to take the football and push some buttons, the people will stop him. So the question is, if on the other side, over there in Russia, who among Putin's closest allies does not want nuclear war, does not want to push the buttons and then have their entire existence and everything they know evaporated because they know that they're not going to win it, they're just going to destroy everything. So that's the question I guess I have. If they do join, and it's obvious, I mean, it's a slap in the face, and Putin's not the kind of guy who's going to just sit there and take that. He's going to do something. He has to do something. And, Ukraine's not going the way he planned it. What happens behind Putin, I guess, is what I want to know. And I don't know anything about Russia. I really haven't paid much attention to it beyond the fact that it's what it always was. It's just not the USSR anymore. And how's that going to work? I mean, who else? There's literally millions of Russians who don't want that. And there are people in positions of power who don't want it. But how much influence do they have, and how would they stop him if they could?
Yeah. All right, well, let me roll into something that's a little bit nicer. Uh-oh, you just froze. Are you there? Yes, your face. You're moving again.
Go ahead.
This I thought was kind of cool from a techie standpoint. SpaceX, which is owned by the man of the day, probably the man of the week, Elon Musk, shut down a Russian electromagnetic warfare.
Man of the year.
Man of the year. Shut down
He might be man of the year.
Electromagnetic warfare attack in Ukraine last month, and the Pentagon is taking notes. Basically, Russia wanted to take out the internet. That's one of the things that you do in war, take out the comms communication systems in your opponent. And they were certainly doing that. And then Zelensky asked Elon Musk, hey, can you send some of those Starlinks over?
Spacelink, Starlink?
Either way. And within 2 days, they had 3,500 of the terminals already deployed. Even ordinary amateur astronomers were saying, hey, we're looking at all of these birds gathering over Ukraine. And presto, instant internet and pretty high speed is from what I can tell. And, after a couple of days, Starlink folks just started to figure out that the Russians were trying to jam everything. And within 1 day, they got rid of the threat. According to this Popular Mechanics article that I sent to you, they only had to change one line of code. Now think about the amount of thought that they probably put in ahead of time to prevent that from happening. It already came out a month or so ago that they got rid of the necessity of using ground link terminals all over the world, because most birds like that, you send something up and then it comes down and you have to have the terrestrial ground station to be able to pick up that signal. Well, if you jam the terminal on ground, it's all gone, except now the Starlink birds are all using laser communication, so they're basically creating a mesh network in low Earth orbit, so that if their particular ground station is blocked, they just pass it off to the next bird, to the next bird, to the next bird, until they get to a friendly one, and then everything continues as possible. Latency goes up a little bit, the amount of time between you send something and you get a response back, but it's still there. And the Pentagon's going, it's a good thing he's an American now, isn't it?
I did read that, and I think it was what was fascinating. And of course, and this is just, we'll probably Skip will post the link this week in a story probably. But you have to read it, because we're talking about generals in the Pentagon and experts in the Pentagon and people who are always thinking about what do we do about EM attacks and electromagnetic this and that, and how quickly we can respond. And the military's ability to respond is very slow and tedious. It would take a very long time, and they could never do what Elon Musk has done in a day, adjusting one line of code. So you get the difference between this guy, Mr. Musk, did all this on his own. He just did it. He brought the experts together, actual experts, not government bureaucrats, and they came up with a system, and they tested and failed it and tested and failed it and got it to work and did it and sent it into orbit, and they wrote the code and they made it as bulletproof as they could, and it works, right? And so now it's up there and it's doing its thing, and you can actually sign up for it. I think it's Starlink.
Yes, it
I
is.
think you can go to starlink.com and you can sign up for this internet service, and it's these satellites, right? And he's still building them, and they're still launching them, and they're still doing what they're doing. And it would take the government just to process the idea to make the change way, way longer before you even got to the point where they could make an adjustment to equipment. So it's pretty, and everything in the government works that way, ladies and gentlemen. And the bigger they make it, the longer it takes.
Well, the cool thing is that, when confronted, our space military is saying, how do we protect our birds, and how long would it take to replace the birds that both the Russians and the Chinese might shoot down? And we know that some of these birds take a long, long time to fix. Well, when somebody asked Elon Musk, well, what if they came after your satellites? He just said, let them. He already has a backlog of satellites sitting in several warehouses that he could just go and get. He's got enough rockets that even if they shot the rockets down, he pioneered the use of reusable rockets to the point where, how often do you see a rocket launch by SpaceX now making major news? It's become humdrum and ordinary, and some of the rockets have gone up 10 times, 11 times. I've got a tab for a later data point showing how much he has brought the cost of getting birds up into space down to where it's not much more than having a FedEx package flown across the nation on a per pound basis. It's just unimaginable. And yeah, it's a good thing he likes America and free speech, because he probably likes a whole lot of the other constitutional values and liberties. As I would categorize him as an eccentric libertarian, because I don't know if he's really a libertarian or not, but he certainly talks a lot of the game.
He has been leaning that way.
He has been, and I think it's refreshing. And I know a lot of Republicans don't like libertarians. Well, too bad.
Yeah, no, I think they're fine. We disagree on a few things here and there.
Yeah, I'm not too happy with the Keene kiddies, but, though they aren't libertarians, they're anarchists. But I digress here. But you look at that. They short-circuited the Russians, to come back to the beginning of the story, with changing one line of code. Now, I have to give props to the programmer who said, oh, I know where that is in probably millions upon millions of lines of code. That's where you become an expert. And I used to do that going around the country, because when something broke, I knew exactly where, quote unquote, if you had this, the equivalent is if you had this big, several football fields piece of equipment, football field long piece of equipment, and it wasn't working right, and you just go around tap, 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 and then this one little spot, you kick it, and all of a sudden it roars to life and the plant's now functional. That's what I used to get paid for doing with software, for my little piece of the software system. That programmer ought to get it's Congressional Medal of Honor is for the military, but what is it for the presidential one? That's what that programmer should get, that award, because that is really difficult to go snap with your fingertips. I know what to do. Here, let me change 4 or 5 things around that code, and off it goes again. And then deploy
Well, we're going to need a different president for that. I don't think you're going to get this one to do it. Although, I did read online that, somebody suggested, why don't you just put Biden's resignation in front of him? He signs everything you stick in front of him, and then we'd be all done.
But then you get Kamala, and then after that you get Pelosi.
I know. We're out of time, so we're going to wrap it up. And look forward to next week when Mike will be able to join us. We're going to start bringing guests onto the program, hopefully in the hour that we're actually recording and not separately. But we can do that. We have the technology. So, Skip, thanks for taking an hour out of your day to spend some time with us and our lovely listeners. And thanks to everyone for listening to GrokTALK.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Corporate big scam. Welcome to the globalist program. Brainwashed and reasoning machines shooting up with fraudulent vaccines. Compulsory government mandate. Shoot it up and watch yourself mutate. Penetration followed by a heart attack. Stroke it out and you won't come back. You've been tricked by a true believer. You've been tricked by something that wants to see you dead. You've been tricked by a true deceiver. You've been tricked by the false god of the earth. Don't ever do what they want you to. Shut it down, avoid their voodoo. They sold you on vaccination. They arranged extermination.